Do you ever find yourself as a midlife age leader calculating how many more budget meetings you've left? Not the actual number, but the feeling of that. The slow realization that you have been through this exact cycle many times and that your body physically resists sitting down at the same conversation at the same table again. At the same time, you yearn to do something different with your life, but you have no idea as to how you might even think about that, not to mind even doing it. This is the question: how do I reinvent myself in the second half of life? Now today, I'm going to give you 3 things that you could actually do to help address that exact search and why they will work. They're drawn from a conversation I had with Allan Tillack and Andy Sheats, 2 men who have genuinely engineered their second half of life in a way that really suits them. By every measure, both were succeeding. Yet, both quietly knew it was time to design something different for them.
Like, I avoid the word reinvention for myself because I don't think I am. I think I'm just iterating towards the person that I actually was always meant to be, and that I actually probably always was on one level.
Yeah.
And that's what, that's how I want it to feel for me. I'm not reinventing myself. I'm actually just moving towards being that person that I think I'll enjoy being and that other people will enjoy as well.
You don't need to be a tech exec or a pharma country head to use what they learned. You just need to be honest about where you are and where you actually want to be over the next 10, 20, 30 years. I'm Paul O'Sullivan, host of Don't Let the Old Man In. Let's dive in. Action number 1. Write down your perfect average day. Not your perfect day, which is a fantasy. Not your average day, which is probably fine but not remarkable. The perfect average day. The one that you could actually live with repeatedly and feel genuinely satisfied. Give yourself about 30 minutes. Write it down in full. Where are you? What time do you wake up? Who's around you? What does the morning look like? What does the afternoon look like? What does the evening look like? What are you doing for money? What are you doing for meaning? Be specific. Andy wrote this exercise in 2 minutes and read it back years later to find he was actually pretty much living that actual perfect average day every day. The specificity is the point. Now, we know this works because midlife dissatisfaction is not a crisis. It's actually a clarity problem. Men have a vague sense that something is off, but they have no concrete picture of what something on would look like. The perfect average day exercise forces you to commit to details, and details are where the vague aspirations become plans. In 2021, the University of Toronto published a study where people articulated specific future scenarios in writing, and they were far more likely to take action steps towards them within 12 months of writing them down. And that's the key part. They had some vague ideas, they wrote down some plans, and within 12 months, action was being taken. The mere act of writing it down moves a wish into a brief. Allan had the exact same experience, but from a different angle. He spent years getting clear on what gave him satisfaction. He watched his senior leadership team that reported to him develop. He watched the coaching moments that he was involved with. He watched the conversations that landed. And before he could name what he actually wanted to do next, he knew he wanted to do more of that. The picture became clear before the plan became clear. And you know what? It always does. You have to paint a picture first before you can create a brief or a plan. Now, share this with your partner if you have a long-term partner. Andy and Jane spent 3 years having versions of the conversation before anything actually changed. But the time was not wasted. It meant that the transition from a senior exec role in technology felt like a movement when he actually took it. It wasn't a rupture. It was a pre-agreed plan that had happened over time. Action number 2, ask for feed forward, not just feedback. The US coach Marshall Goldsmith's feed forward process is very straightforward. You go to 2 or 3 people who know you well at home or at work or in the community, depending on what you're involved with, and ask them one question. What are 1 or 2 things that I could do differently that would make me more effective for you? What are 1 or 2 things that I could do differently that would make me more effective for you? Then stop talking. Just listen. And come back a couple of months later and tell them what you heard, what you've been working on, and ask the same question again. Now that loop, when you run it a couple of times, gives you something that no coach and no book or no personality test or no amount of self-reflection can reliably produce. A clear picture of what other people around you actually experience. Now I say this because Allan, in our conversation, shares something that was really insightful. He described himself spending years being highly adept at deflecting issues. He was well able to string a sentence together and sounded very coherent without actually confronting what kind of ideas or underlying presumptions were driving his behavior. Now, that's not a character flaw. It's what senior, smart people often do. But the intellect becomes a shield. Now, Andy's version of the same thing was different but familiar. He sat down for a 360 leadership review and asked to see the mathematics of the report rather than the insight that was generated from it. He wanted to dispute those numbers because he was very good at disputing anybody's argument, specifically on numbers. He said in our conversation that he nearly walked out of the room, but he came back, and the coming back and the moment of conversation changed his whole game. In 2023, a Harvard Business Study review said that leaders who actively sought and acted on peer feedback improved on all of their effectiveness scores by an average of 15% over 12 months, compared to 4% improvement for those who received the feedback passively. It's the seeking of feedback, the seeking of insight is the difference. Now, I've mentioned Anis Haddad before. He's an executive coach that we interviewed in Singapore, and he says the shift becomes possible when men move from defending their identity to become genuinely curious about their identity. And at midlife, the feed-forward process is one of the simplest ways to help shift that identity. In our conversation, Andy noted that this works just as well at home. He asked his kids how he could be a better father, and their answers really surprised him. But they usually do, and guess what? Now he is. Action 3. You've heard me talk about this before. I'll talk about it again and again because it works. Build a daily reflection practice. I don't mean journaling, if that word puts you off. Journaling can be very useful, but a daily reflection process, even if it's just in your own head. 3 questions at the start of every day. What happened today that mattered? What went well and what fell short? And what's my role in both? It's 3 simple questions. It allows you to continually keep a mind on what you're doing and how you want to reinvent yourself. Now, we know this works. The research and reflection has been consistent for decades. In 2017, one study found that employees who spent 15 minutes at the end of the day writing about what they had learned performed 23% better in subsequent assessments at work compared to those who didn't. Not because they worked any harder, but because they processed what they had already done. Andy called self-awareness the starting point for any kind of development and for any kind of reinvention in the second half of life. It's not the destination, it's the starting line. And reflection is how you find that starting line. You cannot close the gap between how you see yourself now and where you want to see yourself in the future without being honest with where you actually are. Merrick Watts, the famed comedian and actor who appeared on another episode, he talked about the moment he realized that the identity he had built up over decades was not the whole story. And he said that for him, reflection created the space for an honesty that he needed to have. It doesn't have to be dramatic, it doesn't have to be comedic, it just has to be a regular process. So 3 actions: write down the picture of life, the perfect average day that you actually want. Number 2, ask people around you how they find you and what would you need to do for you to be more effective for them. And then at his nighttime, reflect on what's going on for you and your role in that. All 3 together will help you to create a picture of how you can reinvent yourself. At the end of our conversation, Allan put it really simply. He said, know thyself, be true to that, everything else follows. My full conversation with Allan Tillack and Andy Sheats is in the description below. Two men, two different industries, two different lives, but who created a remarkably similar journey in the second half of life. Absolutely worth listening to, so click into that. If this was useful, please subscribe on whatever platform that you're watching or listening to. There's lots more to come, and we love hearing your comments, so drop some in the comment section on whatever platform you're on. Feel free to share this with your friends. We love having new listeners, and a lot of our new listeners are coming from people like you. Encourage them to listen to an episode like this. In the meantime, don't let the old man in.